Glad to see you, Professor Smith. I'm He Dan from China Daily. Thank you very much for giving us an opportunity for this interview. So I know that you came here with Prime Minister Cameron last week for a visit in China. So what do you expect to achieve from this visit, and what do you have discussed with your counterpart in China?
Well, I was here last week with our Prime Minister. The Prime Minister places China as an absolutely central power for the UK to deal with, and thus he brought the largest ever trade delegation that's ever travelled anywhere in the world to China last week, and I led the education side of that delegation, representing, as I do, all British universities. And the themes we're looking at are, firstly, mutual exchange of students and scholars. We're looking at making sure the visa system in the UK works so that Chinese students feel genuinely welcome. We're also looking, of course, in the Education Summit at cooperation between schools.
According to a report released by American Educational Institution, released on Monday, that China has surpassed India as a country which sent the biggest amount of students study in the US. So what about the case in UK?
In the UK, China sends about 110,000 students to Britain, of whom about 85,000 are in further and higher education, and I think from memory just over 50,000 are at universities of those. India sends about 40,000 abroad to the UK, so China has surpassed India in coming to the UK as well.
So how do UK educational sector view its own strengths and weakness compared with other popular destinations such as United States and Australia?
It's a good question. The UK is the second strongest higher education system in the world. If you take students, international students, the US takes about 20% of all international students, the UK just under 12%. That's ahead of any other country other than the US. In research, the US is number one, the UK is number two. And so I would say the great strength of the UK system is a very strong research base. And what we find is that students come to the UK because they get taught by the people who are named as being at the institution. They get well taught and well supported. The UK is very popular. 82% of international students last year were either very satisfied or satisfied with the UK. So we think we have a very, very good reputation for providing a good student experience in a safe environment with a welcoming kind of community.
Statistics show that higher education in UK are worth £59 billion in the economy annually, and it is a major export earner. Last year they brought in about £5.3 billion. So it seems like UK has making education a business. When that happens, students' interests may no longer be served. So what do you think about this problem?
I agree with you absolutely that last year £5.3 billion came from the international students coming to the UK. It's a large export industry. You're absolutely right. But of course, our argument is those students come because they get a very, very good experience. There's many other countries they could go to. They come to the UK because the quality of the education is very high. And thus, I understand exactly the idea that we could just be chasing the money to get income, but I think instead what you see is the demands rightly that international students make on what we provide means that we must be doing it right.
People doubt what students can really get from just 1 year taught course at graduate schools in the United Kingdom. So as a president of University UK, what's your comment about this?
That's another very, very good question. Indeed, your Minister of Education raised it with us last week in the Education Summit. Now, the answer we give, and which I genuinely believe, is that you can't measure the quality of a programme by what we can call input measures, like time. You have to measure them by outputs. What standard does the student reach? And our argument is that a student doing a master's programme in the UK over 1 year reaches a significant step up from the first degree. And we think all the evidence in Europe shows that if you compare what students can achieve at the end of 1 year in a UK university, it's at least as strong, if not stronger, than what many 2-year programmes manage to achieve, because the 1-year programme is relatively intensive. I've taught for 25 years, I taught master's programmes, and we really worked our master's students very hard. I mean, I would standardly require them to read a large amount every week. Now, in a 2-year programme, you might take it a bit slower, a bit easier.
The British government has recently decided to raise their tuition fees for its domestic students. So what are these announcements will affect Chinese students who study or who plan to study in the United Kingdom?
I thought you might ask about this. Last week I was at Beijing when Prime Minister Cameron was asked the same question by a Chinese student. I think actually it's very good for Chinese students, and I'll just explain the logic. At the moment, students pay just over £3,000, UK students. The state pays about £4,000 per student, so about just over 7,000. International students, the average for undergraduate is about 10,000. So we charge international students a bit more, and basically international students pay the full cost and a little bit of surplus. What we therefore won't need to do is to see international students as a source of income that allows us to subsidise home students. And the reason our government is doing this is to try and make change in the university system in Britain the result of well-informed students choosing where to study, knowing that they don't pay up front, they don't pay while they're at university, they pay after they graduate, after they have a job earning a certain amount. But the point is, government's view is that will drive up quality, and it won't mean that international students are in one price group and home students are in another. So I think it's actually good news.
The spending review from the UK government, which means universities in UK, they have to face a 40% cut from the fiscal support from the government. So do you think this policy will affect Chinese students who study in the country?
No is the quick answer, because although the higher education budget is being cut by 40%, what they're actually doing is replacing the state's funding by getting the graduate to pay after graduation. So, as I said earlier, currently students incur a debt of just over £3,000 a year, and the state pays £4,000. The state is basically stopping paying that £4,000, and instead the fee will go up to make the graduate pay rather than the state. I see no implication for Chinese students.
Are there any significant changes in the visa policy which may affect Chinese students this year?
Our Prime Minister was asked about this last week, and he gave a very clear answer that Chinese students are absolutely welcome to the UK, and we've got to have a visa system that enables Chinese students to come and study. There has been a problem in Britain that people have come on visas, especially student visas, in order to work. So they've come in, got a visa, never gone to the institution they're meant to study at. Now, that actually isn't a problem for the universities. It's tends to be language schools where that happens. We've been in discussion with the government recently, and they are absolutely confident that they can come up with a system whereby students from all countries, but certainly China, are welcome and are made welcome. And I think the top universities, if you get a place, getting a visa should come automatically.